We had C9 versus Vegas. Obviously, not a lot to say here. I don't think we both expected C9 to win. They did. They nearly 100-point clubbed Vegas in the first hard point, which was the 18th straight hard point loss for the Falcons this season. They have not won a hard point so far. And then there was a 6-4 S&D win, a 3-1 control. I feel like our Vegas segments, and anytime we talk about them, it's going to get increasingly shorter and more
Yep.
brief as we go on this season. Do you have anything to say on something we all expected?
No, I mean that's just really like, I don't think it was too long ago where I said this, but you kind of, I think a little bit quicker than me were like, yeah, I mean this is just the reality, comparing it to, Vegas to past Boston last year, some of the other historically bad CDL teams, in the sense of like, we're just not going to spend as much time talking about them until they give us something to talk about, right? And I was like, yeah, I tried to be positive for a little longer than I probably should have, and I was like, I've seen some flashes of potential and some rays of hope, however you want to phrase it, and now it's just at that point where it's like, they really, no matter what the roster iteration has been and all that, there really just isn't anything to write home about right now with this Vegas squad. Was watching the Scump watch party today, and Methods was pretty blunt about it too. He was just like, they're just not a pro level team at this point, and like he's like, I feel bad um about the position they're in, because they were given this opportunity and they haven't, I forget how he worded it exactly, but it's basically like they instead of having a team and then having the Saudi players compete in challengers, and then if some of those Saudi players shined in challengers, you could pick and plug them into the main roster. They were just like thrown into the fire right away, and it hasn't worked out yet. It's not. I don't think, trying not to be disrespectful or anything like that, but I really don't think it's disrespectful at this point to just say like they haven't shown that they belong at this point. And I still think inevitably it's really getting hard, but I do think inevitably they're gonna win a hard point and they're gonna win a series. But it's getting more bleak just by each series. I'm just like, man, maybe it's actually not gonna happen, and then we're gonna have a longer conversation if that does become the reality for the Vegas Falcons 2025 season. I know I brought this up, I think probably in our wish list episode or something like during the holiday break, but like everything we've heard so far about Vegas Falcons makes it sound like they are committed to the Saudi roster experiment, but we've seen it with the Falcons' involvement in other esports where they have just spent a lot of money, or at least in theory or reportedly spent a lot of money on superstar rosters with non-Saudi players. And it, you know, it feels like if this experiment fails this year, they have that option open to them if they want to go down that route next season. And they would obviously be more competitive than what we've seen this year. But if they want to stay, committed to the all Saudi experiment, then that's their option as team owners and whatnot. But um, that also gives us the option to, you know, sit here and not talk much when their team continually gets pummeled.
Yeah, and it also opens up the possibility for people to resent them, and even the players themselves. Even though that's not fair, like they're in this position, and I'm sure they want to be in this position, but the the feeling is that they haven't deserved this. They're not worthy of these spots, and they've proven that in how they played. Granted, we've seen in the past, like there are just random teams each season. The Boston Breach last season, Vegas, or the Paris Legion a few seasons ago, where they proved like they're just not on the level of these other teams on a consistent basis. Yes, they can get close, they can win matches on occasion, but they're just not good enough to compete against the top level players and teams in Call of Duty esports. That being said, the Vegas Falcons appear to be the worst of the worst of any of those teams that we've had in the CDL era. I can't remember before the CDL era other than Epsilon, and they were one of the worst, and it was made abundantly clear by fans, media, and the players themselves that they knew that they were the worst. I I feel bad for the players because that it sucks for them, I'm sure, to be on this bad team and get the hate and criticism that I'm sure they're getting. At the same point, though, like that is just like part of the deal, I guess, right? If Challengers players were in their position and they were stinking it up in the CDL, I think people would criticize those players as well for different reasons, but they would still get criticized and be told that they're not good enough. So I think it's only fair that we do that with Vegas. And we don't have a lot to talk about with their matches because they're just like it's a surprise when they win a map. Let alone if they win a series, which will be like we'll probably end the podcast that day just to make sure that people can go out and celebrate. But it's bad, and I think they had another match later in this week. So like we'll briefly talk about it again.
Yeah, I feel like you said, I feel for the players just in the sense of like, like you said,
You take it like you want that
they
opportunity.
definitely can shoot back and they can shoot straight, but
Yeah.
just like putting it all together, it just hasn't worked. And that's where like I feel for Clayster as well because again, going with sports analogies here, I can't think like there have obviously as a Browns fan, not throwing shots, but there have been Browns teams that go 0-16, 0-17, whatever it was. The Colts I think had an 0 for season like before they got Andrew Luck. But I don't think the coaches were like rookie coaches on those teams. Those were just bad teams that didn't win. And I think Chuck Pagano was the coach of the Colts before, and then he got Luck. I don't really remember. But regardless, like this is Clayster's first season coaching after retiring, and you're a big Clayster guy. I really like Clayster as well. His last few years competing did not go as well as he would have hoped, and I think he would probably be pretty open about that. And then you have some struggles towards the end of your playing career, transitioning into coaching, and your first year of coaching is on a team that possibly might not win a series or a hard point for the entire year. Like that's got to be tough. And he's had some stuff going on in his personal life too. It can't be easy for him, and it just makes me wonder like how much can we really evaluate Clayster as a coach? I feel like it's almost impossible based on this season alone. Like if he was the coach of another team and it was an NA team that didn't have the excuses that we're saying, like new players and playing against NA talent for the first time, yada yada, all that stuff we said about Vegas. If he was a coach of another team, like let's just use Minnesota as an example, and Minnesota was struggling, we would probably say similar things like, it's a young Vegas team, Clayster's in his first year, like we got to give him some time. But then we play devil's advocate, and let's just say Clayster was the coach of Optic this year after Optic wins champs, and Optic goes through this little winless spurt here. Then you're probably sitting here like, what's Clayster got to do differently as a coach? All this yada yada. And I know those are some weird examples, probably just because it's not the reality we're in. But I think it is worth at least mentioning that Clayster's got to be having a rough time with this, and I feel like he's a good person to be coaching a roster that's doing an experiment like this, just because he is so talented as a COD player and is really smart as a Call of Duty mind. So he's like, if you want somebody teaching raw talent the fundamentals and what they should and shouldn't be doing on the map at times, Clayster is one of those guys at the top of the list, I feel like, but it's obviously just not translating to the matches themselves, and I feel like that's got to be tough on him and the squad in general.